Welcome back to another video, guys. This month's joint is going to be, hey, those aren't the same size. It doesn't matter. This month's joint is going to be one that I've never tried before. It has been done before, obviously. There's YouTube videos out about it, but I think mine's going to look better than everybody else's when I'm done with it. Ooh, already talking smack and I haven't even started cutting yet. That's good. That's the old samurai. That's channeling young Jesse. Okay, so we're doing the impossible dovetail. So that means that I'm gonna join this piece to this piece, and we're gonna have a dovetail on all four sides. How is that even possible, man? Well, you're gonna have to just stay tuned and watch me smoke this joint. So the depth of the dovetail is going to be 2.5 inches, just a nice even number. You want to work with a very fine pencil or a knife if you want. And your layout is critical, so you want to make sure that once you bring all four of those lines around, they meet up with each other. There's no stagger at all, not the slightest bit. So accuracy is going to be based off your layout and obviously the execution of your cutting. But even if you cut perfectly, if your layout is slightly off, it's going to look like shite. So everything's got to be bang on here. So we've got 2.5 inches. Looks deadly. Now I've also squared this up on the jointer, so it is perfectly square, okay? And that is important on a joint like this. So after I marked the 2.5 inch shoulder marks all the way around all four faces, I then marked center on each face and drew a center line. And then off of that center line, I laid out my dovetail. So at the narrow part of the dovetail where it meets the shoulder, I'm going for 1 inch. And then at the widest part of the dovetail, I think I did 1 3/4 inches. So 7/8 to either side of center and 1/2 inch to either side of center on the narrow end. Now the way to fit this joint is it slides together from the side. That's kind of the spoiler for this whole joint. So you can see that the dovetails are connected kind of on a 45-degree. And in order to fit the joint together and not have to be hammering and dealing with all sorts of friction, the way to fit it together is to put a slight taper on it. So you can see that on 2 of the faces, I've made a 1/16 inch narrower mark so that the dovetail has a 1/16 taper on both sides. Now, in order to cut this on the bandsaw, I had to make a little 45-degree V-block to support the piece because all the cuts are going to be kind of on a 45-degree, and that would be hard to do on a bandsaw without a little V-block like this. So. Okay, so I've roughed that out on the bandsaw. That was actually pretty easy, but my layout has a slight taper to it. So I've got a 1/16 taper on both of these dovetails from one end to the other, obviously. And so I've got to pare down right? Because the bandsaw cuts square, so I've cut pretty close to the line here. Just needs just a little touch with the chisel. But then I have to pare that 1/16 of an inch off. I don't know if you can see in the camera there, the taper. So we gotta square that, and then we've got to cut down our bottom lines here. I cut pretty close with the bandsaw, but we'll have to pare the bottom shoulders of this down right to the line. And then once we have our tenons all paired and looking nice and sharp and clean, then I will start to measure that with the caliper here. Measuring the width at the top and the bottom, and then I'll transfer that to lay out my corresponding piece. So the reason why I've left this to the end is because if by any chance, you know, I taper these a little too much or a little too, you know, they're not exactly symmetrical, taking my measurements directly off those tenons will still ensure a really tight fit. Even if even if they're a little bit off, right? So I want to make sure that this piece is finished and complete and where I want it, and then I'll lay out based off of the finished piece. So this is a fun part. For those of you who have cut dovetails before, you're probably wondering why I'm doing it that way, because that way is wrong. So I put my piece on top and just totally brain farted and realized that scribing that on top, I thought it was clever, but it was completely wrong, as the wide end of the dovetails isn't supposed to be there. It's supposed to be at the shoulder of the joint. So I'm laying these out upside down, essentially. And the funny part / embarrassing is how long it took me to recognize this. Now, we all make mistakes. Anybody who's done some DIY, carpentry, stuff like that, you screw up, you lay things out wrong all the time, and the one thing you hope for is that you catch it before you go and start cutting everything and fix it. But no, not me. I thought I had laid this out correctly and took it right to completion and went right to the saw, and it wasn't even until I started cutting, as you will see here in a minute, that I realized
I know which sides of the taper faces. I can measure this. It's going to be...
Well, that's how you know it's the end of the day. It took me that long to clue in that my layout was upside down. It wasn't until I saw the piece fall out that I was like, How's that going to hold anything? So this should have been the fat end. That should have been the small end. Oh man, Jess, you're getting old, bro. Well, thankfully I can just cut that off and try laying it out again.
This video has been made possible by my monthly sponsors, U2 Fasteners, Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's, and Princess Auto. If you want to see what these great retailers have to offer you, please check the links in the description box below. Thanks for watching.
Okay, let's try this again here. I think I've got my layout right this time. Now you might be thinking, what the heck is this joint even used for? Is this just a flex? Is there actual practical use? There's so many ways to join two pieces of wood together that's easier than this. But I will say that there is an actual practical application for this joint, and it's commonly seen in places like Japan, and they use this to replace the bottoms of posts in temples and homes where the wood has come in contact with the ground or the stone or the foundation and it's rotted away, but the remainder of the post is still in good shape. So what they do is they just cut out the rotten section at the bottom and then they slide in a piece like this, and that extends the life of the post. I will say that despite not being the biggest fan of dovetails, these ones were actually kind of fun to make because the angled edges of the dovetail make pairing the faces really nice and easy as you're cutting across the grain, so you don't have to worry about catching the grain like you would on a straight tenon. So despite being labor intensive, it is an enjoyable labor for the most part. That went pretty smooth. Okay, so we got a bit of a hump. So I like to use a straight edge like this to check my cheeks there. I got a tiny little bit of a hump on that side. Let's see here. So that's the tapered side. Okay, so it goes like this. Ooh, ooh. That's pretty good for a first time thing. Well, I'd say I'm pretty proud of that, considering it was my first try at the impossible dovetail. And I think it turned out okay. Like, it's not my best work, but, you know, it's tight-ish. The hardest part is getting the that end grain tight. I think in the future, I might tape, you know, because the tenons are tapered, but I also might taper the tops. You know, that would be the only way to really ensure that you get these perfectly tight. You know, it's pretty hard. Like, everything's really square, but when you're dealing with that many surfaces, it's really hard to get it perfect. But I'm happy with the sides. There's no gaps there. There's not really any gaps on the side, so that part worked out well. I just got to dial in that
length game, that shoulder game, but pretty cool. All right, and so the taper goes this way.